Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Joining me today, a very special guest, Cesar Hernandez of ESPN. He is going to be covering the Mexican national team in Mexico throughout the World Cup. Cesar, welcome to the show, and excited to talk to you about Obed Vargas and the Mexican national team.
Most definitely. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so Obed Vargas, obviously this is the main reason we are interested in El Tri. What is how would you describe his place in this team? Because it seemed to me as recently as, a month ago that he was a long shot to make it, but sure enough, there he is right in the squad and getting some minutes, and we still don't know quite what his role will be.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think he's a rotational option, and I think what helped him recently was, unfortunately for Mexico, they had the injury to Marcel Ruiz. And I think when Marcel Ruiz was therefore not available for Mexico, that then gave that opportunity for Obed to be in this team. Now, if you're going to ask me, is he going to be a starter at the World Cup? Is he going to be a key player at the World Cup? I'm not entirely sure about that. But I do think that if Mexico are up 1-0, it's the 70th minute, they need to close out the game. They need kind of a settled presence in the midfield, not some sort of attacking threat. Then that's where I think that Obed will be a key figure. But we'll see how many minutes he does actually get. I mean, yesterday's friendly against Serbia, he stayed on the bench, did not get any minutes. And that was pretty much close to the starting 11 that Mexico is going to have at the World Cup. And we saw some players off the bench who will be having some key roles off the bench. So I don't think he'll be a truly game in, game out impactful player, but I do think he will get some minutes and be a calming presence for El Tri.
Does it seem like the move to Atletico Madrid was a huge, how big of a factor do you think that was in him ultimately getting into this team?
I think it's a significant factor, especially when you consider the manager, Javier Aguirre. A lot of people, maybe they're not aware, but Javier Aguirre really truly made a name for himself as a coach in La Liga. So he knows plenty about the significance of that league, and he knows plenty about being able to have, and I was about to say a starting role. I know we can't really say that, but I mean, Obed was getting starts in recent games for Atletico Madrid.
I think he made 8 starts or something like that, all in league play.
So I think there's no way of overlooking that, right? And I think that he's had some good moments too for Atleti. I mean, he had an assist as well recently for Atleti. So I think that's something you couldn't overlook. And yes, he's still a young kid. If it wasn't for teenage phenom Gil Mora, Obed would be the youngest player on the roster. But that being said, I mean, you've seen it. You saw it week in and week out. He's surprisingly mature, surprisingly calm.
Yeah, he's a player. The way I sort of always described him is that he's someone who once he gets into a team, it's like once the coaches see him up close and personal, they sort of start to fall in love with him because he doesn't make mistakes, that he does a lot of the simple stuff well, and he's capable of doing more than just the simple stuff, but he is someone who I know he seemed to believe that if he could just get in front of Diego Simeone on a regular basis, that it would just be a matter of time before he sort of won him over. And that seems to be what happened. And it didn't even really take that long. I was surprised that you look at all the players that have made the move from MLS to a team of the caliber of Atletico. And oftentimes they go immediately on loan. And whether or not they play for the first team or not is sort of like lost to time, right? But he was in the roster almost immediately. He wasn't starting right away, but he was able to, like you said, just sort of he got himself into regular starts. I wouldn't say he was a starter. He may have only been the second or third. He took advantage of some opportunities of injuries and whatnot, but still, it'll be interesting to see if that ends up playing out at the World Cup as well, where it's like you see Vargas enough times, and it's like, yeah, why don't we get him into the team? But it is interesting that this is, at least from afar, it seemed like Mexico's midfield was starting to get a bit old, and all of a sudden now they have these 2-3 guys who are all quite young, and now all of a sudden the future seems very bright for at least in the center part of the midfield for Mexico.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I mentioned him already, Gil Mora, who also plays in the midfield. I mean, he's more sort of an attacking option, but because when he was growing up,
he's the youngest player in to make any roster, and he could be a starter. Is that right?
I was going to say, some like group chats yesterday, a lot of us were surprised that he was not starting for Mexico. So I think a lot of us are anticipating that he'll start in the next game. But then, then you have Brian Gutierrez, who's been killing it with Chivas. Then you bring in Obed Vargas, and then Marcel Ruiz, who's injured. I mean, I know he's not the youngest player, but still, he's only 24. You throw him in with the other guys too, and suddenly things look decent for Old Tree in their future. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so more broadly, as far as Mexico goes, what is what would you say the general feeling about the team is? There's just been a lot of publicity, and El Chicharito came out and said how, everyone is so negative about the Mexican national team. That's why players sometimes don't want to play for them. But what is the feeling going into this World Cup? Is it more positive than it has been?
I think that, I think about the entirety of my life, actually, with the pessimism that comes with the Mexican national team, and seeing them always do well in the group stage and they get immediately knocked out in the knockout round. And in the last World Cup, they didn't even make it into the knockout round. I was there in Qatar when they fell out in the group stage. So I think that kind of represents this idea that Mexican soccer has, I don't want to say it's regressing, but it has stagnated since the 90s. So I think because that there's always that sense that Mexico is also a big fish in a CONCACAF sized pond. And guess what? It's no longer the only big fish. Now you have Canada, now they have US. And then suddenly you look at other national teams within the CONCACAF pond, you're realizing, okay, teams are reaching the same level, if not surpassed what Mexico's done. That kind of has lingered for years, if not decades now. Now, here's the thing. With Aguirre stepping in, it's kind of funny because it's almost like, and with Rafa Marquez as his assistant coach, suddenly there's this nostalgic sense of, oh, what if? Remember back in the day when Aguirre took charge of the team, he really elevated Mexico as a firefighter of sorts. I don't think he had to be a firefighter in his third tenure here with El Tri, but what he has done is he's made them more practical. And I think that's kind of a throwback to Mexican soccer. I don't know, maybe back in the 90s, I guess we could say, is that there was more practicality than more all-out attacking, brilliant soccer that can lead to disastrous results at times. Now, with all that in mind, what that's then led to is a surprisingly good run of form for Mexico. I mean, they're undefeated in 2026. They have 6 wins, 2 draws, 0 losses this year. I think it was 15 goals scored. I think only 2 allowed. And then you close out everything in preparation with a 5-1 thrashing against Serbia. So suddenly hopes are now pretty high going into the World Cup. Am I going to say Mexico are going to go very far? Well, I don't know. And that kind of represents that. I was about to say no, but
Right.
that kind of represents now this new sense of optimism for the national team. So it's undeniably exciting now, and it's not just because the World Cup's landing on home soil for a limited amount of time, but there is a new sense of optimism.
So you mentioned some of these recent results, and it's just worth sort of like running through it to give it a little bit of context. So Mexico beats the United States to win the Gold Cup in July, and then they go on a 6-match winless run to close out 2025, and then they pick up in 2026, and they scored. It wasn't that they just went 6-0-2. They did it against pretty good competition. They beat Panama in Panama. They beat Bolivia in Bolivia. They beat Iceland 4-0. Then they tie Portugal and Belgium, 2 teams that in the same window thrashed the United States. And then they beat Ghana 2-0, Australia 1-0, and then this, like the most recent game, the 5-1 win over Serbia. These are good results against real international teams. And I have to imagine that it's lifting sort of the spirits of maybe skeptical El Tri fans.
It has to. I mean, it absolutely has to, because this is also the moment in which a lot of Mexico fans will say, well, this is different when you're playing in a friendly environment. The World Cup is an entirely different situation. Qatar will be challenging. Russia will be challenging. Brazil. And then you're like, oh, wait, this is actually going to be in a friendly environment. This is going to be a situation in which Mexico will be co-hosting the tournament. Yes, even if Mexico finish in second place in the group, then they'll be playing in Los Angeles. And guess what? That's also a very friendly environment. That was part of Mexico's send-off series, was that game recently in Pasadena. So you can't help but feel extremely, extremely optimistic.
Well, and so you bring up this idea that LA could be a friendly environment for Mexico. Now that might be understating things. LA is really kind of the home away from home for El Tri especially. I would guess that they have played as many games in LA as they have played anywhere else, right? But it's also part of a seemingly a growing trend of Mexico embracing dual nationals, and not just dual nationals, but Mexican Americans. Players who grew up, not just have 2 passports, but who really grew up in the United States and are, for all intents and purposes, Americans who are now playing for Mexico. Obed being one of the prime examples, and Brian Gutierrez being the other on this national team. Does it feel like there is a real changing shift in terms of the embrace of dual nationals and Mexican Americans in particular?
100%. And it's something that the Mexican Federation needs to capitalize on. It's something that the Mexican Federation needs to really take advantage of, because the second largest Mexican city, when you're looking at total Mexicans, is after Mexico City is Los Angeles. If California was a state in Mexico, it would be the state with the second most amount of Mexicans, if you include the Mexicans Americans as well. And then you couple that with a recognition that MLS academies are also improving. MLS academies are definitely they're at a different level than they were, let's say, in even a decade ago. Actually, I mean, I'm seeing that actually to an extent. I'm seeing it at a different level here in San Diego as well. Obviously, San Diego's in a unique situation in which they can, bring in players from Tijuana, but then that also adds in a different layer as well when you think about dual nationals. So I think that this is something that Mexican soccer has to capitalize on, and especially when you think about that a lot of these players, they may. I'll use myself as an example. I feel extremely Americanized in many ways. I was born in Los Angeles, went to school up in Northern California, was basically a hippie over there in Santa Cruz for quite some time. But if you ask me which team I have the strongest connection to, it is Mexico. And I think a lot of that tends to be cultural. A lot of it, there's so many similar stories of kids saying like, yes, I'm American and I was born in this US city, but when I think about soccer, I think about my dad. When I think about soccer, I think about my mom. When I think about Thea, I think about a Theo. So I think that is a common trend. And that is something that Mexico 100% has to do, especially since who was it that I was talking with? There was someone who they worked within like the youth national team setup in Mexico. And they said that a big advantage that they have when they're catering to dual nationals is that they're saying, hey, you know what? You can choose USA, you can choose Mexico, but you know what? Just come to your home country. Like let's show you around where your parents are from. Let's show you Mexico City. This is part of like your lineage, and that will win over a significant amount of dual nationals. So I think that's also fascinating as well. But yeah, I think it's something that Mexican soccer has to continue to capitalize on, and I think we're going to see a lot of overlap there. And the same we could say possibly for to an extent the U.S. When you look at someone like Alejandro Zendejas, he's making a name for himself in Club America, and he's living the American dream out there in Mexico City, but now representing the U.S. men's national team. So it's interesting how it can go both ways as well. And that the duality of Mexican American soccer, which seems to be blurring and blending in so many different ways.
No, it is, and I hope that this is sort of like one of the stories that does end up getting told by this World Cup that has has 3 nations hosting it, and there's been so much negativity, and a lot of it deserved. Like, let's be honest, I think a lot of the negative press that is around the World Cup is not some cynical ploy to look for bad stories. It's a genuine reality that FIFA has pissed off a lot of constituents. But there are some fun, like really positive stories to tell about sort of the crossing borders and the sort of the blending of these cultures, that if we can get past the ugliness of some of the politics, that there's like some like genuinely nice stories to be able to tell that hopefully get told as well. Speaking of which, what has we've heard a lot about frustrations with FIFA and the whole ticketing process in the United States. What's that story like in Mexico, where they have some stricter rules and laws against secondary markets, right?
Yeah, so I haven't dived into it too much as I did with the U.S. From what I have seen from reports, it's not my reporting, I've seen it from other reporting, is that I believe, and like don't quote me on this, but I believe on the resale market, you have to sell the ticket at face value in Mexico. That being said, there are still frustrations with the prices of tickets that I have definitely seen in Mexico. With the amount of tickets are going in Mexico City, in Guadalajara, and Monterrey, fans are still feeling priced out of the tournament. Yes, the prices are lower in Mexico than they are in the US, but fans are still feeling. I think if you asked an average Mexican soccer fan, they'd probably be just as frustrated as American fans when it comes to the amount of these ticket prices.
And I'm assuming you've been on the ground in Mexico relatively recently. What's the attitude? Is it, are people, because I think here you find a lot of mixed emotions about the World Cup. Like I think there is a sense of once the ball starts kicking, people will get more excited about it. But in the lead up, so much of the coverage has been negative, and so much of it has been about what's wrong. Is it similar in Mexico?
Fans are still frustrated. I would still say that it's similar to the U.S., but what I will say, though, is that I think that they're still more excited about the tournament, at least from what I've seen. I was just in Mexico City last month, and there was signage and advertisements and vendors and you could sense that people were already getting excited about the tournament. So that I can say, like, as a fact, as someone who was just in Mexico City for about a week last month, and I'll be flying out there tomorrow, but I think there is still a little bit of that frustration for the numerous reasons that we can kind of we could dive into when it comes to the World Cup. But I do think that there is a little bit more of that anticipation of that, I guess, just the thrill of hosting another tournament too, because I think that, like,
setting a record for the first country to ever host 3.
Yes, exactly. I think that there's also obviously the U.S. has hosted a World Cup as well before, back in '94. But I think it's something different for Mexico and for Mexicans to say, hey, we're the first country to be able to host three. And it's something that doesn't go back, not just, let's say, for Americans who say, oh, I remember 1994, but for Mexicans to say, hey, I remember 1986. Hey, I remember 1970. And this could be like three different generations. I mean, like one of the things that actually struck me was that, I mean, it was a knockoff shirt, like some random store that I went to, but it was like a dad with a 1986. It was like a 1986, like on the back of his like shirt, and he's like lifting up a little Mexican kid. It says 2026 on the back. I don't know. So I think about that as well, and then you could throw in 1970, and it reaches a different level, and then you couple that with the obvious. No, but I don't have to tell you this. Everybody knows this. It's just that the level of fandom for soccer in Mexico is obviously different than that of the United States. I don't have to tell you that. So you couple that, and then you have a lot more excited fans.
And one of the things here that we obviously you're well aware of is that there's a sense that the international tourism that we were sort of expecting a year or two ago has not materialized, or doesn't seem to be materializing for a lot of real world reasons. Has Mexico, do you have any sense of whether or not the international visitors are coming to Mexico in the way that I don't know, meets expectations?
That's a good question. I mean, but my answer to that is I don't know. My answer to that is we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. I mean, I'm really fascinated about that as well. And I think that and how they're received as well. I mean, I guess the most recent example, which I guess is promising, is that, South Africa, Mexico's opponent, that they'll be playing next week. They showed with Pachuca, but then the crowd, so many people from Pachuca went out there and embracing them. One kid asking for autographs. They brought out a mariachi for this opponent that Mexico not to face. So, but which this is all a long answer for I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, it is an interesting. I mean, that's one of the things I'm really fascinated to see if Canada or Mexico end up seeing this influx of because a lot of the international sort of chatter has been, it's almost like a boycott against the United States, which is deserved and fair, and I not here to not here to question it, but I wonder if those folks are instead going to Mexico, instead going to Canada, and because that is the fun of the World Cup, right? It's what makes this tournament so different than every other tournament really on earth is that it's this bringing together of all these people, and that it's I guess you could say the Olympics are similar, but this feels very different just because people are following teams, and it's a level of fandom in soccer that is just different than it is in other sports, and it's sort of this universal language. And I know that's one of the things that I'm feeling a little bummed about is that I think Seattle will still do, it'll still be a fun place to be, but it's just not going to be the international experience that I think we had hoped it would be.
I feel like we're allowed to feel both ways though, right? Because I think about myself in Qatar, where heading into the tournament, I felt a little weird, right? And I felt a little frustrated, and I felt conflicted. But then once the tournament kicked off, it was a lot of fun, and I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun out there, and you were meeting people from different cultures and whatnot. And I think I'm allowing myself to feel that same situation in this tournament too, to feel bothered about the things I should feel bothered about. And I mean, we just talked about the ticket prices. We could talk about so many other things, but also to be appreciative of the soccer and appreciative of people coming together. And well, and hopefully we don't run into some serious issues, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, you never know. We have quite a wild card here.
Yes. To say the least. Well, and so it sounds like you're going to be in Mexico though for basically the next month. Is that about right? Correct. Yeah, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. So basically, just following the Mexican national team, and then sneaking in. We'll see TBD on some other games, but sneaking in another game or two out there, and then we'll see for the knockout round.
Well, that's I mean that'll be a fun adventure. I'm sure that'll be at the very least something that will be individually fulfilling and interesting, and I do hope that Mexico does well in this tournament. I hope the United States does reasonably well. I find myself hoping for exactly the quarterfinals. Like I think that's for the US. Like that's the like where I'll feel good about the sporting part of it, and we don't have to worry about anyone sort of glory hunting over that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's the same for Mexico. I mean, I did talk about like why that's their big goal. The quinto partido was this kind of like mythical goal for quite some time. Now it's not the quinto partido now because there's now another knockout round.
You don't think they're gonna? You don't think if they get there that they'll say no, the curse is over?
I think because of the new format, you're gonna have to make it to the sixth game. I think it's now this because the mythical status was reaching the quarterfinals. It just happened to be the fifth game. Now it's going to be the sixth game. So that'll be the new. Yeah, that mysticism of that fifth game is now out the window, if you ask me. So I think I'm on the same boat too. That I think that like for Mexico, and yeah, obviously the U.S. too. I think that a respectable quarterfinal exit would be a success.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly my view of it. I was actually just talking to another podcaster on our show, and they've been sort of the debate here is, does it count as a knockout game if the U.S. wins the round of 32? Because the U.S. has only won one knockout game in its history, and that was obviously against Mexico. And my attitude is, well, yeah, it counts. It's literally a knockout game. Yeah. But if the goal is to get to the quarterfinals, that's a different measurement. But I don't know. It is interesting how this all is going to be different and how it's going to change. And I'm ready for games to start actually getting played and some of that. So we'll see.
Likewise, and we'll see. We're not ready to do all the permutations just yet to see who some of those third place teams will be. I don't know. I'll save that for the number crunchers.
Right. Because I guess Mexico also got kind of lucky, like the United States, in that if they win their group, they'll play a third place team.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. So I'm not going to waste my time like for who that team could be. I don't know. It'd be a lot of work, or maybe it wouldn't be that much work. But I'm just waiting for that to all roll out, and then we'll see how they play.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Assuming you never know. Assuming they make it to the knockout round, you never know.
You can never assume. I mean, I don't know. We also have talked about this, is that I think everyone that's following the U.S. certainly feels like, even though it's a tougher group than I think a lot of people appreciate. Mm-hmm. Like Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey are all good teams. None of them are bad teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are also no great teams, and so it feels like the U.S. has a relatively clear path to getting out of the group. But if they don't, it would be a massive failure, but that's how it is. But all right. Well, Cesar, where can people follow you, and where can people follow you?
Yeah, just on social media. You can follow me at Cesar H Football. Usually pretty active on Blue Sky, and usually just Blue Sky. I should probably use my Instagram account more. I don't really do that. On Twitter,
and of course, read you on ESPN.
Yeah, yes, and that as well. Yes,
yeah,
that company. But I thought you were talking more about.
No, I know. I just want to make sure. Yeah.
But yes. Also on ESPN, we'll see. Obviously, that's where all my work will be published. Might be doing some video work out in the World Cup through ESPN. We'll see what happens. But I'll be following Mexico, eating some good food, and probably
eating some of the best food. Let's not be too.
Yes.
You're gonna be treated to some amazing food, I'm sure, during this trip.
Elite, world-class food.
Absolutely.
And complaining about the traffic probably every day.
Will you just out of curiosity, will you take the metro in Mexico City?
I usually just take Ubers because they're fairly reasonable and cheap, and just I get a little lazy. But I mean, I might, if like the traffic does actually get ungodly at like an even worse level than it usually does. But I usually try to, I don't know, like give myself enough time to get to the spots I want to go to. So we'll see. But I probably more than likely just relying on Uber. They don't have Lyft out there, so it's just only Uber. But yeah, probably just doing that.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Cesar, thank you for doing this. And I'm sure people will be very interested in following your coverage, because we have quite the interest in Mexico these days. So good luck. And we'll catch up with you next time. I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadietas, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network, and we will catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders.